Tommy Curran, how we doing this week?
Tremendous. How are my guys?
Very good. Oh, we're doing great. I think
Tis the season.
We're doing a little better than Jerod Mayo these days. You referred to the aftermath of Sunday's loss as dysfunctional. Mayo throwing Alex Van Pelt under the bus. What do you think it means, if anything, for his job security?
Well, they needed to start, I think, this final 4 games on the right foot. This was a great opportunity after 2 weeks off to say, okay, we've been building towards something, and we're going to show that these final 4 games will be a springboard into 2025. We're going to evaluate, we're going to make our decisions, and we'll be a better team next year. Unfortunately, for 60 minutes, they were the same team on the field. And then, unfortunately, in the postgame, they were, with Mayo stepping on the rake verbally, were kind of the same and a little bit worse, because this was an occasion in which certainly the bus throwing, then the bus has done a lot of work over the last couple of days in so many ways for people. But what it suggests to me is, where's the communication? If you would even infer that, if Drake May would say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to run, if Mayo would later, and what he said was his cleanup answer to the question, add on that we know he can run, he's got a good pair of legs, like he's Betty Grable. Why isn't this not being articulated? Alex, this week, we got 3rd and 1, we got 4th and 1, we're down low, we're inside the 10. I want Drake on the edge in a dual threat situation. How can this stuff not be articulated? Because I cannot imagine that Alex Van Pelt is sitting there with his arms crossed and saying, nope, no way, not doing it. We don't want to get him hurt. Because Alex Van Pelt needs to win games, needs to succeed, needs to do all those things to be back next year. So how can this be at a point where Phil Perry asks a question about, well, what about Drake? For the 9th time, I think Phil's asked it in those situations. And Mayo to say, you said it, not me. And it defies everything we know about communication in 2024 America to think that he meant anything other than, good point, Phil. I'm trying to say the same thing, but it's just not getting through. How in God's name could it not get through?
We were thinking of putting together a 2025 calendar where there's a quote a day from Jerod Mayo, and I think you said it, not me, is one that's going to be on there at some point too. But just how damning is the visual of Robert and Jonathan Kraft on TV straight up calling out the play calling and saying it's terrible. Even if Alex Van Pelt's doing a better job than, say, Jerod Mayo is at his job, I don't know how Van Pelt survives that. I mean, barring like an amazing 3 games down the stretch, I mean, that was point blank out there in front of millions of people. Those two, your 2 main bosses, saying how bad of a job you're doing.
Well, because the camera caught them, I think we're all digesting it differently. But did you think that they were going to say, if the camera wasn't on them, oh, boy, just a bad luck on that one, when Vidarian Lowe gets turnstile for the 9th time? I mean, whether it was caught on TV or not caught on TV, you would presume that the Patriots were already somewhat at wit's end with just the aggressiveness of the play calling. I know that to be the case. I think that the team in general has yearned to be more aggressive with the play calling, and Van Pelt hasn't done it. I think we have a better understanding now between Jonathan's facial expression was almost like the Alonzo Mourning meme.
Yeah, it kind of was.
Where he goes off, he points, he shakes his head, and then at the end he kind of just dummies up and raises an eyebrow like, well, what are you going to do? We won't have to do this again next year. But to me, what's so fascinating about this situation is Alex Van Pelt is slowly having the skids greased for him, and he's being put in the crosshairs, yet he has done the most important thing that the team needed and declared this year, which was to develop Drake May. May has said it. Mayo has said nobody deserves more credit than Alex Van Pelt. But as time goes by, it seems as if, okay, well, if we're going to make May great and the team is going to be great, we have to play a certain way that Alex Van Pelt is either resistant to, or we're just not telling him because we don't want him to start being really good so we can replace him later. I don't get it. It comes back to I don't get, if you didn't want him because he was your 12th choice and he was a temp and you couldn't tell everybody that, okay. But don't scapegoat him in a way that makes it seem like he sucks, because he hasn't sucked.
Right. I mean, we've been pretty consistent on this. He's been the best at his job compared to all those other guys. And yet it does feel like we're 3 games away from them having fewer wins than they did last year and going into the offseason on a 7-game losing streak. I don't know if there's any way Robert and Jonathan can spin it as we're going to bring everybody back. And even if
there's no way that's happening.
Okay. You can't do it, even if you end up moving on with the guy who deserves to be here the most, right? Like, what a mess that would be.
Say that again. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have interrupted.
No. I'm just saying, I'm with you. Like, I feel like a change has to be made, and then the way things are going, it seems like the guy that's going to be out is Alex Van Pelt, who is better than Covington, Mayo, Wolf at their current jobs.
Agreed. Although, again, I can't get it, Jonesy. Like, is it insubordination? We want May to do more things. We want to be more aggressive, because May's insinuating it as well in the most diplomatic, polite, I'm just new here and I love everybody type of way. But everybody is registering dismay at the lack of aggressiveness from the head coach to the quarterback to ownership. How can this not be penetrating? That to me is the failure to communicate your aspirations for what the team should be doing and you want it to do is the most mind-boggling to me.
Well, it's head-scratching, and it's Tommy Curran's Flex of the Game. It's presented by Flex Car. You can ditch the dealership and save thousands with your Flex Car. I think we'd be remiss not to ask Tom about Bill Belichick not only landing at the University of North Carolina, but potential interest in the New York Jets on his behalf. What'd you make of that story over the last few days?
My reaction was he's just kind of kicking the tires on every opportunity before he moves on to North Carolina, and doing so reluctantly. I hate you, you hate me, right? So we're not doing that? Okay. But it is interesting that, Albert Breer has done a good job reporting on it and stating that there was real, at least, interest on Belichick's part to feel out the process and see what kind of dialogue they could have, but that he needed an answer very quickly from the Jets as to moving forward, because he was down the aisle with North Carolina. So I guess my reaction after processing all the ramifications of him marrying up with Woody Johnson is there is a reluctant aspect to going to North Carolina. And that out clause for Bill does insinuate that, if I can rehab my image and somebody comes knocking, I'll go. So that to me is interesting. And even if you look at the quotes with Jim Gray that, they put out on Sirius XM from the Full Let's Go podcast, and I read the transcript and read it closely, because nowhere does Bill say, I'm not leaving North Carolina. He says it's where I am. It's where I want to be. Doesn't say it's where I'm staying. Says he's looking forward to it. So you can tell by the Jets' interest and the point at which he expressed the interest in the Jets that it was kind of a last-ditch send up a flare. Anybody up there want me? So I found that interesting.
What do you think would make for a successful tenure at North Carolina, and do you think he will be?
To me, a successful tenure should be that he turns it into a top 5 program and they play in, the college football playoff and win some games. You don't have to win the national championship, but you should qualify for the 12-team playoff a time or two. I don't know if he's going to attain that. And the reason I say that is, again, game day, he's going to probably kick the crap out of plenty of teams. He's going to be able to sit there and look and say, my God, Virginia has no idea how to protect this punt situation. Their personal protector has no idea what he's doing. So we're going to go after that, and we're going to block this punt, and we're going to run this play. And he's going to pick teams apart that way. But when we talk about player development, it hasn't happened at the NFL level. Why is it going to happen at the college level?
No, it's a good point. I heard you say this on TV the other day. You're like, it's been 5 years since they developed really anybody at the NFL level. So why are they going to do it at UNC? It's a fair question. He's Tommy Curran, NBC Sports boss.